Imagine you were standing on a bustling street, right in the center of Thessaloniki.
Yeah, the Mediterranean sun is just beating down on you.
Exactly. And you are surrounded by the absolute chaotic energy of a modern Greek city. I mean, this is Filippou Street.
It's quite the place to just stand and take it all in.
It really is. It looks, for all intents and purposes, like an ordinary, lively thoroughfare. But before we get into the hidden layers here, I want to explicitly state right at the top that this deep dive is a special feature.
Right, this is a unique one for us.
Yeah, it's part of a wider project called The Street Has Its Own Story, or in Greek, O Dromos Ekitidiki Toi Historia, which is by Giannis Stefanidis.
It's a fantastic project to be a part of.
Truly. And our mission today is to take you on a narrative walking tour down Filippou. We're going to trace its current vibe, its hidden interwar architecture, a massive ancient Roman Agora.
Which is just hiding in plain sight.
Literally.
Yeah.
And ultimately, we're going to dive into the life, the really bloody assassination, and the controversial golden tomb of the warrior king it's named after.
It is basically the ultimate exercise in urban time travel.
Oh, totally. Walking down Filippou is like reading a history book where all the pages have been completely shuffled.
Yeah, you take one step and you are in the 1970s. You take another step, you're suddenly in 1928.
Right.
You look over a railing and you are staring straight down into the 2nd century AD.
And towering above all of it, just conceptually, is the 4th century BC.
It really messes with your sense of time in the best way.
Let's start with the physical reality of the street today, though. We are walking a stretch that spans roughly 1.3 kilometers.
Right, starting from the intersection with Singru Street.
Yeah, and it cuts eastward all the way down to the Rotunda. And honestly, the first thing that hits you is this incredible, youthful, kinetic energy.
Well, you are so close to the Aristotle University campus there.
Exactly. So this entire stretch, especially as you get closer to the Rotunda, it's just completely defined by student life. It's carefree, it's loud, it's very nocturnal.
And that youthful energy exists in this really stark contrast to the physical shell of the street itself.
Yeah, it's a lot of concrete.
So much concrete. If you look at the dominant visual landscape, you are looking at a sea of post-war apartment buildings. Most of these were constructed in the 1960s and 1970s.
Right, they have that very blocky look.
They do, and to understand why the street looks like this, we actually have to look at the mechanics of Greek urbanization.
Because it wasn't just a stylistic choice, right?
No, not at all. After the devastation of World War II and then the Greek Civil War that followed, there was this massive rural exodus.
People fleeing the countryside.
Exactly. People were pouring into cities like Thessaloniki, looking for work, looking for stability, and the city just had to house them immediately.
Right. There was absolutely no time for, ornate urban planning. It was a complete crisis of space.
Exactly. And this led to a system known as anti-parochi.
Which is a fascinating concept.
It really is. Basically, landowners would give their small plots of land to developers. And in exchange, they'd get a couple of apartments in the new building that was erected on that site.
So no money even needs to change hands up front.
Right. It was highly efficient. But it resulted in these incredibly dense, utilitarian concrete blocks.
Now, some architectural historians will point out that there are actually quite interesting examples of post-war modernism hidden in these blocks, right?
Oh, for sure. There is a certain honesty in the concrete, the functional balcony is meant to capture the breeze, but overall it creates a very dense, heavy atmosphere.
And we have to be honest about the aesthetic reality here for a second. I mean, it is not all pristine.
No, definitely not.
There's a very visible, undeniable contrast on Filippou. You have these vibrant student cafes operating on the ground floors of buildings that, well, they show serious signs of urban abandonment.
You see a lot of the broader decline of the city center.
Yeah, you see graffiti covering the lower walls, crumbling plaster, metal roll-down gates over closed storefronts. It can feel a bit neglected in places. Doesn't that ruin the historical magic for the listener?
I would actually argue that this slight decay is exactly what makes the walk so rewarding.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, think about it. When an urban environment is perfectly manicured, when every facade is restored and sterile, you just become a passive consumer of the litty.
Like walking through a theme park.
Exactly. It's like walking through a museum where everything is already framed and lit for you. But Filippou Street demands active engagement.
It forces you to become an urban archaeologist.
Right. Because the street is a bit rough around the edges, you have to hunt for the beauty.
I love that.
When you are scanning a row of weathered 1970s concrete and you suddenly spot a perfectly preserved, century-old neoclassical balcony wedged between them, The discovery feels earned.
It's like finding a pearl in an oyster. It's a jolt of aesthetic pleasure that you just wouldn't get in a perfectly sanitized historic district.
You really do have to look up to find the magic on this street.
But before we look up, we have to talk about the ground level. Because the local flavor here is so specific.
The furniture stores.
Yes. Right around the midpoint of the street, you hit this cluster of traditional furniture stores. And I love this detail because it's so grounded in the reality of the street.
It's very mundane commerce.
It is. You have like 19-year-old students wandering in to buy cheap particle board desks and bookshelves for their tiny dorm rooms. It is the most everyday thing imaginable. And then right behind those furniture stores,
the earth just vanishes.
it literally drops away.
Yeah.
The modern grid simply yields to a massive archaeological scar.
It's an incredible transition. You are looking at students buying desks, you turn your head, look over a chain-link fence, and you are staring into the Roman Agora.
It sits perfectly nestled between Olympou and Filippou Streets. And it's jarring in the best possible way.
The Roman Agora forces you to completely recalibrate your sense of scale. I mean, this was the beating heart of Rome and Thessaloniki.
So to understand its function, you have to imagine the civic life of the average Roman citizen living here, right? Right. Like in the 2nd century AD.
Exactly. This was not just a marketplace. It was their shopping mall, their Supreme Court, their administrative center, and their social media feed all rolled into one sprawling complex.
And the scale is staggering. I mean, they started building the main phases in the mid-2nd century AD and then massively expanded it in the mid-3rd century.
You are looking down at a massive rectangular square. You can see the remains of a circular bathhouse.
There's an Odeon, right?
Yeah, a small theater. They used it for musical performances, poetry readings, public trials. They even had their own mint to strike local coinage and a massive document archive.
But the architectural feature that absolutely blows my mind out of all of it is the cryptoporticus.
Ah, the cryptoporticus is a marvel of ancient engineering.
The name literally translates to hidden portico, right?
Right. What you have to visualize is a double underground corridor system. Above ground, you had these beautiful colonnaded walkways where the elite could stroll and discuss politics while escaping the heat.
Because the Mediterranean summer is no joke.
Exactly. But beneath those walkways, dug deep into the earth, was this subterranean superstructure. The ground floor of this hidden corridor likely served as a massive, temperature-controlled warehouse.
Right, because if you are managing a city of that size, you need a stable environment for grain, for olive oil, all the logistical lifeblood of the empire.
Precisely. The thermal mass of the earth kept the cryptoporticus cool and dry.
It's just wild to think about the engineering.
The sheer structural engineering required to build and maintain a subterranean vaulted complex of that size, supporting the weight of marble colonnades and crowds above it without modern steel reinforcement, is just a huge testament to Roman ingenuity.
And today, the city has brilliantly utilized this space. There is an underground museum actually built into the site.
It's a fantastic museum.
It really is. It details the entire history of the excavation and traces the site's usage all the way back to the Hellenistic period. You can walk right into this underground museum from the southeast corner at the intersection of Filippou and Agnosto Stratiatou.
Or you can use the accessible entry on the southwest corner at Macedonicus Aminus.
But, you know, as incredible as the architecture is, I want to talk about what is missing.
The ghosts of the Agora.
Yeah, because if you walk just south of this area, near where the ancient Paradisos baths were located, there used to be a monument that defined the skyline for centuries.
Oh, this is a truly heartbreaking chapter in the city's cultural history.
I am talking about Las Encantadas, the enchanted ones.
Right.
Imagine this structure. It was a stunning 2-story colonnade, and carved deep into the pillars were these massive, breathtaking, mythological figures.
We are talking high-relief sculptures here.
Yeah, a Maenad, Dionysus, Ariadne, Leda, Nike, Aura, or the Dioscuri, and Ganymede. These ancient gods and nymphs just towering over the street.
And they stood there for so long.
Centuries. For centuries, the local Hispano-Jewish population of Thessaloniki, the Sephardic Jews who formed a massive part of the city's demographic fabric after fleeing Spain in 1492, they lived right around this area.
They walked past these colossal stone figures every single day of their lives.
And they were the ones who gave them their name in Ladino, right? Las Encantadas, the enchanted ones.
The mythology the local community built around them is fascinating.
What kind of myths?
Well, there were folk tales that these were real people, perhaps an ancient king and his court, who had been turned to stone by a curse.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they survived everything, the total collapse of the Roman Empire, the entirety of the Byzantine era, centuries of Ottoman rule. They were just woven into the daily psychological landscape of the neighborhood.
And then came the 19th century.
Ah, yes.
And the European obsession with just taking everything that wasn't bolted down.
The era of high society antiquities stuff.
Yeah.
It's so frustrating. In 1864, a French paleographer named Emmanuel Miller arrived in Thessaloniki.
And he didn't just sneak in.
Yeah. No, he was operating with the direct permission, a firman from the Ottoman government, which controlled the city at the time. Miller saw Las Encantadas and simply decided they belonged in France.
The logistics of this theft are just maddening. I mean, you don't just slip a 2-story stone colonnade into your pocket.
No, it was a massive, destructive industrial operation.
It's horrible to think about.
Miller brought in heavy equipment and workmen to literally saw these colossal figures off their ancient foundations.
Just sawing through history. How did the locals react?
They were reportedly distraught. There are accounts of people weeping in the streets, protesting, realizing that the soul of their neighborhood was being violently excised.
But they had no power to stop it.
None. The Ottomans had given the French permission, and that was that. The enchanted ones were packed into heavy wooden crates, loaded onto wagons, hauled to the port, and shipped off to Paris.
And they are still there today, sitting in the Louvre. It's infuriating, but it perfectly illustrates the central theme of Filippou Street.
Layers upon layers of history, some missing, some still there.
Exactly. You have a street with a name from 300 BC, built directly over a Roman square from 200 AD, missing statues stolen by the French in 1864, surrounded by students in 1970s apartments.
It's quite the mix.
But wait, we haven't even looked up at the true hidden gems of the street yet. We need to talk about the palaces.
Ah, the interwar architectural boom. This is where the street transitions into a living, open-air museum of European design.
To understand why these buildings exist, we have to talk about fire. Specifically, the Great Fire of August 1917.
That was an absolute apocalypse for Thessaloniki.
It really was. The fire swept through the historic center and essentially leveled it. Over 70,000 people were left completely homeless in a matter of hours.
The old, winding, densely packed Ottoman-era city was just turned to ash.
It was a catastrophic human tragedy, but from an urban planning perspective, it presented a completely blank slate.
Right. The Greek government brought in the French architect Ernest Hébraud to totally redesign the city.
And his vision was pretty ambitious, wasn't it?
Extremely. The goal wasn't just to rebuild. The goal was to aggressively reinvent Thessaloniki as a modern, cosmopolitan European metropolis.
They wanted broad avenues, rational grids.
And monumental architecture. And the architects who designed the new buildings on Filippou Street were very eager to participate in this grand European vision.
They wanted to project absolute confidence and wealth to, erase the trauma of the fire. And you can read that exact psychological transition just by walking past a few buildings.
Let's look at Filippou 43.
Ah, the Sotiropoulou mansion.
Yes. It was designed in 1929 and finished right around 1930. Now, for the architecture enthusiasts listening, there's a great historical correction here.
What happened?
Well, for decades, this masterpiece was attributed to the famous architect Maximilian Rubens. But recent archival evidence actually proves it was the work of Georgos Manoussos.
Oh, wow. Credit where credit is due. So what's the style here?
Manoussos designed a spectacular example of late eclecticism.
Which is what, exactly?
Eclecticism is essentially an architectural philosophy where you borrow the most dramatic, impressive elements from various historical styles, specifically heavy Baroque and Classicism, and fuse them together.
Why choose that specific style in 1929, though?
Because Baroque projects power and permanence.
Yes.
I mean, after your entire city burns down, you don't want a fragile-looking house. You want a fortress of culture.
That makes total sense. And the Sotiropoulou mansion has this intense plasticity.
Exactly. When we say plasticity in architecture, we mean the facade isn't just a flat wall with windows punched into it.
It behaves almost like a sculpture.
Right. It has deep reliefs, shadows, and massive protruding elements. There is perfect, rigorous symmetry in the balconies.
It features colored reliefs, and there is a stunning decorative metope like a carved architectural band just under the parapet.
It was designed as a luxury urban residence for a wealthy family, and almost a century later, it still commands the attention of anyone walking by.
But then you walk literally one door down. You take 5 steps to Filippou 41, the Siskou's mansion.
built slightly later in 1938.
And the architectural vibe is completely, totally different.
The shift is jarring, and it is entirely deliberate.
What changed?
By 1938, the global context had radically changed. The euphoria of the 1920s was dead. The Great Depression had ravaged the global economy, and the drums of World War II were beating loudly across Europe.
So society was anxious, resources were tightening.
Exactly. And architectural tastes shifted globally toward austerity, functionalism, and early modernism.
So the heavy Baroque ornaments, the dramatic sculptural facades, they just vanish.
They do. The Siskou's mansion represents this transition into Art Deco austerity. The massive decorative reliefs are gone. Instead, the beauty relies entirely on geometry.
You have clean, sharp lines.
Beautifully harmonious, symmetrical openings. The volumes of the building are balanced perfectly. It is a much more restrained, sleek, almost defensive elegance.
Seeing these styles side by side makes me realize how desperate they were to cram a century of European progress into a single decade.
It really was architectural overcompensation. They were racing to catch up with Paris, London, and Berlin while simultaneously reacting to massive global economic shocks.
And the most visually striking part of the street is that Filippou 39, 41, 43, and 45 all form this continuous, unbroken row.
You get this sweeping panoramic view of interwar urban elegance.
All painted in these varied but incredibly soft pastel-like colors. And just down the street, you hit Filippou 32 and 34, which are known locally as the Twins.
The Twins are a masterclass in blending broader European models with distinct Art Deco geometry.
They feature these very tall, elegant windows, capped with specialized skylights to maximize natural illumination. But the defining feature is the curved balconies.
Those balconies are amazing. They create a rhythmic, undulating repetition all the way down the facade.
Yeah, it lays a trick on the eye, right?
Yeah, the architects brilliantly used this curved repetition to make two completely distinct buildings look like a single, massive, unified architectural block.
We absolutely cannot skip the corner of Hagia Sophia 60 in Filippou, though.
Oh, if you want to know what the 1930s felt like, look at this corner mansion.
It is the ultimate fusion of Art Deco and early modernism. And its standout feature is the erker.
For those unfamiliar with the term, an erker is essentially an enclosed, protruding balcony.
Kind of like an oriel window.
Very similar, but often extending over multiple floors. And what's brilliant here is how they used it. Usually, a street corner is a sharp, harsh 90-degree angle.
But this building uses a curved erker to smoothly, aerodynamically transition the corner. It softens the entire intersection.
And if you lived inside, it offered these incredible panoramic views down both streets.
The architect paired this smooth curve with these incredibly strict vertical geometric railings. It just screams 1930s industrial optimism.
And that is just the highlight reel. If you keep walking, you find Filippou 17, which retains beautiful Art Nouveau floral and plant motifs.
Then you have numbers 51, 33, 35, and 9 and 11, which represent later modernism still clinging to a few lingering eclectic touches.
And near the Labor Center, the Aegae, there are three perfectly preserved buildings that the locals quite literally refer to as the city's palaces.
It is a testament to resilience.
Yeah.
The city burned, and their immediate response was, let's build palaces.
They certainly succeeded.
But here is the massive historical pivot of our walk today. We are looking at these stunning 1920s and 30s buildings, and in the context of Thessaloniki, they feel historic.
But in the grand scheme of Greek history?
1929 was basically yesterday.
Very true.
The name of the street itself, Filippou. Philip bypasses the 20th century, bypasses the Romans, and points directly to a man who violently shaped the entire trajectory of Western civilization over 2 millennia ago.
It is definitely time we dive into the namesake, King Philip II of Macedon.
A historical titan who is all too often relegated to a footnote, which is crazy to me.
He is perpetually overshadowed by his son, Alexander the Great. But if you study the mechanics of history, it becomes blindingly obvious that Philip was entirely responsible for laying the logistical, military, and diplomatic groundwork for every single thing Alexander ever achieved.
Alexander was the spearhead, but Philip forged the spear.
That is a perfect way to put it.
Let's wind the clock all the way back to 382 BC. Philip is born in the ancient city of Pella. He is the third son of King Amyntas III and Queen Eurydice.
Now, structurally, being a third son means you are a spare.
Right, you are not expected to rule.
Exactly, you are expected to be politically useful. And his early life reflects that brutal reality. It was, quite frankly, a nightmare.
What happened?
When his eldest brother, King Alexander II, was assassinated, the kingdom was thrown into chaos. To secure temporary peace with their enemies, Philip was shipped off as a royal hostage.
First to Illyria, right.
Yes, and then later to Thebes, where he spent 3 vital formative years from 368 to 365 BC as a teenage captive.
We really need to dwell on the intense psychological pressure of being a hostage in the ancient Mediterranean.
It's not what we picture today when we hear the word.
No. When we hear hostage today, we think of a kidnapping.
Mm.
But a royal hostage was a recognized political institution. You are a living, breathing bargaining chip.
You are treated well, you are fed, you are educated.
But your life hangs by an incredibly thin thread. You are entirely dependent on your family back home, playing by the rules.
Right. If your brother breaks a treaty or launches a border raid, your captors will simply cut your throat.
It is a state of constant underlying existential terror. But Philip didn't just cower in his room in Thebes.
No, he did not.
And Thebes wasn't just some random backwater. At this exact moment in history, Thebes was the premier, undisputed military superpower of Greece.
They had just done the impossible. They had completely crushed the legendary Spartan army at the Battle of Leuctra.
Thebes had cracked the code of infantry warfare, and Philip was placed in the house of Pamines.
Pamines was a prominent general and a champion of the elite Sacred Band of Thebes,
Which is one of the most fascinating military units in history. A unit composed entirely of 150 pairs of male lovers.
operating on the theory that a man will fight like a demon and never abandon his post if his lover is fighting right beside him.
And it worked flawlessly. They were considered the most fearsome shock infantry in the known world.
And while living among these men, Philip received an elite, first-hand education in military strategy and diplomacy from the absolute masters of the era, the legendary generals Epaminondas and Pelopidas.
He basically treated his captivity as an intensive military academy.
He really did.
But how exactly does a hostage observe and learn military tactics? Like, they just let him watch.
Through constant proximity and observation, as a noble hostage, he dined with the generals. He listened to their logistical debates. He likely observed their drills.
So he's soaking it all in.
Right. He studied exactly how Epaminondas revolutionized the phalanx by packing his infantry incredibly deep on one side to smash through the enemy line, rather than spreading his men evenly.
He learned how to coordinate infantry with cavalry.
Most importantly, he learned the dark arts of Greek diplomacy. How to bribe rival factions, how to stall for time, how to divide your enemies.
He was essentially downloading the tactical and political software he would later use to conquer the very men teaching him.
Exactly. So his captivity finally ends. He returns to Macedonia around 365 BC. He is given a provincial governorship. He marries his first aristocratic wife, Philine.
He is settling into life as a senior noble.
But then catastrophe strikes Macedonia again.
Because of course it does.
In 359 BC, his older brother, King Perdiccas III, leads a massive army against the Illyrians. And it is a slaughter.
Perdiccas is killed in battle along with 4,000 Macedonian troops, right?
Yes. The army is decimated. Philip suddenly becomes the regent for his infant nephew, Amyntas IV, who is technically the new king.
But Philip doesn't stay regent for long. He swiftly usurps the throne, sidelining the baby, and declares himself King Philip II.
Which was a bold move.
Now, I have to stop and ask. He stole the crown from an infant. In a deeply traditional society, how on earth did the Macedonian nobility justify backing an usurper?
Well, because the concept of divine right is a luxury that a dying nation cannot afford.
Okay, that makes sense.
We have to look at the horrifying reality of Macedonia in 359 BC. It was not a stable empire. It was facing absolute existential annihilation.
The Illyrians had just slaughtered their king and a massive chunk of their fighting-age men, and they were occupying Macedonian territory.
The Paeonians saw the weakness and started raiding and pillaging from the north. The Thracians were threatening to invade from the east.
And if that wasn't enough, the Athenians, sensing blood in the water, were landing mercenary troops on the Macedonian coast to prop up a rival pretender to the throne.
So they were facing 4 simultaneous invasions from every point on the compass. The state was days, maybe weeks away from total collapse.
The Macedonian nobles had to make a brutal, pragmatic calculation.
A kingdom facing a forefront war of annihilation needs a battle-tested, ruthless, adult warrior king who can mount a horse and swing a sword.
They did not have the time to wait 15 years for a toddler to grow up.
Exactly. The survival of their families, their lands, and their nation depended on a strong man. Usurping the throne wasn't seen as a crime. It was seen as a desperate measure for national survival.
So Philip takes the crown, but he is inheriting a kingdom on the brink of death. To survive, he realizes that the old, traditional way of fighting simply isn't going to cut it.
He has to completely rewrite the rules of ancient warfare.
And this brings us to his absolute masterpiece, the creation of the Macedonian phalanx. Now, to understand how revolutionary this was, imagine a traditional Greek hoplite, the standard infantryman of the time.
Right, they carry a spear that is maybe 7 to 9 feet long.
And they hold a massive, heavy, bronze-faced wooden shield called an aspis that covers half their body and half of the guy standing next to them.
Philip looks at the system and basically says, let's weaponize geometry.
He arms his men with a new weapon called the sarissa.
The sarissa is the technological leap that built an empire. It was a massive pike, crafted from dense, flexible cornel wood that measured anywhere from 18 to 20 feet long.
20 feet? How does a human being even hold a 20-foot stick in combat without it snapping or dropping?
It requires a fundamental redesign of the soldier. Because the sarissa was so incredibly long and heavy, it was impossible to hold with one hand.
So they needed both hands.
It required a firm, two-handed grip. And to balance the massive weight extending in front of the soldier, the back end of the pike was fitted with a heavy bronze counterweight called a sauritor, or lizard killer.
Which also allowed it to be planted in the ground to withstand cavalry charges, right?
Exactly.
But wait, if they're using both hands to hold this massive pike, what happens to the giant shield? You can't just send infantry into battle without shields.
Well, since their hands were full, Philip introduced a much smaller, lighter shield called a pelty.
Okay, how did they hold it?
Instead of carrying it, the soldiers suspended it from their necks and strapped it to their left shoulder. This freed both hands to manage the massive pike while still providing torso protection.
But the true genius of the sarissa was mathematical. Because the pike was 20 feet long, the spears of the first 5 ranks of soldiers in the formation extended past the front line.
It's terrifying to picture.
I always try to visualize it as a human porcupine made of 18-foot spikes. It created an impenetrable wall of iron tips. If you are an enemy hoplite charging forward with your standard 8-foot spear, you physically cannot get close enough to strike a Macedonian soldier before you were impaled by 3 or 4 different sarissas at once.
It completely corrupted and broke traditional hoplite warfare.
And Philip didn't just change the weapons, he changed the military culture.
He vastly expanded the size of the army, doubling both the infantry and the elite heavy cavalry, known as the companion cavalry.
He instituted a level of strict, unrelenting discipline that the Greeks found shocking. Like, he banned the use of extensive ox carts and wagons for the soldiers' gear.
Which seems minor, but structurally, it's massive. It is the secret to his success.
Because wagons slow an army down to a crawl.
By forcing every single soldier to carry their own weapons, armor, and rations on their back, Philip massively increased the strategic marching speed of his army.
They could appear out of nowhere, miles ahead of where the enemy scouts predicted they would be.
He also professionalized the army by introducing merit-based promotions and catch bonuses. Before Philip, men fought out of seasonal obligation to their local lord. Under Philip, you were fighting for a lucrative, lifelong career.
So he builds this terrifying human porcupine, and he unleashes it, using a mix of brilliant diplomacy, massive bribes to corrupt enemy politicians, and the new phalanx. He immediately stabilizes the borders.
In incredibly rapid succession, he defeats the Paeonians. He crushes the Thracians.
He annihilates a 3,000-strong Athenian hoplite force that had landed on his coast. Very quickly, the prey becomes the predator.
By 357 BC, he is securing his southern flank through marriage alliances, taking the Epirote Princess Olympias as his wife.
And 356 BC is just an incredible year for him. His racehorse wins at the Olympic Games, which provides massive cultural prestige and proves his Greekness to the snobby southern city-states.
And his wife Olympias gives birth to a son, Alexander.
But we must heavily emphasize that Philip was not a detached mastermind who sat on a hill directing troops.
Oh no, he led from the absolute front line. The companion cavalry charged with the king at its head.
And in ancient warfare, leading from the front meant you absorbed unimaginable physical trauma. Philip gave pieces of his body to build this empire.
Let's talk about the siege of Methone in 354 BC. He is fighting the Athenians, he is up at the front lines inspecting the siege works, and he takes an arrow square in the right eye.
The medical reality of that injury in 354 BC is horrifying. The arrow didn't just glance off, it penetrated the eye socket.
He didn't die of infection, which speaks to his incredibly robust constitution and the skill of his royal physician, Critoboulos.
The physician had to surgically extract the arrow shaft and the bronze head from the king's shattered eye socket on a battlefield.
Likely without any real anesthetic beyond wine, and then cauterize or pack the wound to stop the bleeding.
Philip survived, but the right eye was permanently removed, leaving a horrific facial scar.
And that wasn't even the end of it. Nearly a decade later, in 345 BC, he is fighting against the Aegae, an Illyrian tribe led by King Pleuratus I.
And he suffers a catastrophic leg wound.
During the chaotic melee of a cavalry skirmish, a spear was driven entirely through Philip's right thigh.
Just brutal.
The force of the blow was so immense that the spear passed through his leg and impaled and killed his horse beneath him.
A spear through the thigh muscle. You were talking about severed tendons, massive blood loss, torn muscle tissue. The pain must have been blinding.
The sheer willpower required to survive the ensuing fever and infection, let alone ever mount a horse again, is staggering.
He survived, but he was left with a severe, agonizing, lifelong limp. His body became a map of his conquests.
The limp didn't stop him. He pushes forward. He wins the massive Battle of Crocus Field in 352 BC during the Third Sacred War against the Phocians.
This is a huge political victory because it allows him to become the head of the Thessalian League, effectively integrating the legendary elite Thessalian cavalry into his own army.
He pushes east, capturing Olynthus, subduing Thrace, and pushing deep into Scythian territory, founding the city of Philippopolis, which is modern-day Plovdiv in Bulgaria.
He is an unstoppable force, and this culminates in his crowning achievement, the year 338 BC, the Battle of Chaeronea.
Chaeronea is arguably one of the most decisive battles in European history. Philip marches south to finally break the resistance of the major Greek powers.
He faces a combined, massive allied army of Athens and Thebes, the very people who held him hostage decades earlier.
Exactly. And at Chaeronea, Philip unleashed the full tactical genius of his military machine. He commanded the right wing of his army, executing a brilliant, feigned retreat.
He ordered his men to slowly walk backward, drawing the Athenian infantry out of their defensive line and breaking their formation.
Meanwhile, a young 18-year-old Alexander commanded the companion cavalry on the left wing. When the enemy line fractured, Alexander led a devastating cavalry wedge right into the gap, annihilating the elite sacred band of Thebes, the very unit Philip had studied as a boy.
He crushes them using the tactics he perfected. And with that victory, the geopolitical reality of Greece is permanently altered.
With the victory at Chaeronea, Philip effectively ended the era of independent, squabbling Greek city-states. He united them, mostly by force, under a new federation called the League of Corinth.
And he installed himself as the hegemon, the supreme military commander of this unified Greece.
And the stated purpose of this grand alliance: to launch a massive pan-Hellenic war of vengeance, a full-scale invasion of the Persian Empire.
Philip had spent decades building a highly tuned, terrifying military machine, and he had finally secured the unified Greek base required to launch it.
But just as he is standing on the precipice of world conquest, everything falls apart.
2 years later, in 336 BC, Philip is at the absolute zenith of his power. He is deep into preparations for the Persian invasion.
He has already sent a massive advance force of 10,000 men under his top generals, Parmenion, Amyntas, and Attalus, across the Hellespont into Asia Minor to establish a beachhead.
But before he leaves Europe himself, he has to secure his domestic alliances. So he organizes a spectacular wedding in the ancient royal capital city of Aegae.
His daughter, Cleopatra of Macedon, is marrying King Alexander I of Epirus, who is ironically the brother of Philip's wife Olympias. It's a classic ancient world political marriage.
The wedding at Aegae was intended to be a theatrical display of Philip's absolute, untouchable supremacy. He invited dignitaries, politicians, and artists from across the entire Greek world.
He wanted everyone to witness his glory before he marched east, and to project total confidence, to visually demonstrate that he was beloved by all his subjects and feared no assassination plot. Philip made a fateful, deeply theatrical decision.
On the day of the grand procession into the theater of Aegae, he ordered his heavily armed royal guard to hang back.
He decided to enter the theater completely unarmed, walking slightly ahead of everyone else, flanked only by his son Alexander and his new son-in-law.
He is projecting invincibility. And out of the shadows of the theater entrance steps Pausanias of Orestes.
This is where the story turns into a political thriller.
Pausanias wasn't a Persian spy or a random hired thug. He was a member of the Lakes, Philip's elite inner circle of 7 trusted bodyguards.
Pausanias rushes forward, pulls a short Celtic dagger from beneath his cloak, and drives it directly into Philip's ribs, piercing his heart and killing the architect of the Macedonian Empire instantly.
The psychological shock of that moment is hard to overstate. The most powerful man in the world, struck down at his own daughter's wedding by his own guard.
Chaos immediately erupted in the theater. Pausanias pulled the dagger out and sprinted desperately for the gates of the city where accomplices were supposedly waiting with fresh horses.
But in his panic, his foot caught on a vine root. He stumbled and fell.
He was instantly chased down and killed by 3 other bodyguards, specifically Leonidas, Perdiccas, and Attalus.
It is the ultimate cliffhanger of ancient history, and it spawned 1,000 conspiracy theories. Did his estranged wife, Olympias, plan it to ensure her son Alexander would inherit the throne?
Did Alexander himself know about it?
Or was it just Pausanias settling a personal grudge over a horrific assault he had suffered at the hands of another noble? We will never truly know.
But the geopolitical fallout was instant. The sudden death absolutely devastated the Macedonian vanguard over in Asia Minor.
Without Philip's commanding presence, the advance force panicked and was pushed back by the Persian mercenary commander Memnon of Rhodes.
But more importantly, the assassination catapulted a 20-year-old Alexander to the throne.
And that transition of power fundamentally altered human history. It forces us to ask perhaps the greatest what if in classical antiquity.
What if Pausanias hadn't tripped? What if the dagger had missed? What if Philip had lived to lead the Persian invasion himself?
How do you think it would have played out differently?
I believe it would have been a fundamentally different war. Philip was, at his core, a cautious, highly methodical planner.
He was a statesman who used diplomacy and bribery just as much as brute force.
If Philip had led the invasion, his primary goal would likely have been to secure the wealthy western provinces of the Persian Empire, Asia Minor, the Levant, perhaps Egypt, and then negotiate a highly profitable, stable peace treaty with the Persian king.
He was a pragmatist. Alexander, however, was a completely different psychological animal.
He was driven by a burning Homeric desire for eternal mythic glory. Alexander didn't just want to defeat the Persian king, he wanted to unseat him and become the Lord of Asia.
He wanted to march to the edge of the world. Alexander had no off switch.
Precisely. Philip's assassination was the exact violent catalyst required to unleash Alexander's specific brand of megalomania upon the world.
Without that Celtic dagger in Aegae, the sweeping Hellenistic era, the founding of Alexandria in Egypt, the spread of Greek culture all the way to the borders of India, it simply does not happen. At least, not in the way we know it.
It is absolutely chilling to think about.
A single dagger stroke, a single tripped foot on a vine root, rewrote the map of the world. And yet, for over 2 millennia, the physical remains of this larger-than-life king, this one-eyed, limping genius who forged the phalanx, were totally lost to time.
Buried under the earth and forgotten.
And this brings us to the final act of our narrative walk today. We're going to transition out of the ancient world of 336 BC. We're going to leave the concrete of Filippou Street, and we are heading into the 20th century to a small town located about 80 kilometers away called Vergina.
The modern discovery of Vergina is a masterclass in historical persistence, and it is a narrative that perfectly blends modern Greek refugee history with ancient royal secrets.
To understand the magnitude of the site, you have to look at the town's origins. The modern town of Vergina is surprisingly new. It was only founded in 1922.
Right in the aftermath of the Greco-Turkish War and the Asia Minor catastrophe?
Yes. It was established between 2 much older small settlements, Kautlans and Barmpis, which had previously belonged to a powerful local Ottoman bey.
These older settlements actually had a proud revolutionary history of their own. Local fighters from the area, men like Stamatios Constantinou and the Margariti brothers, Demos and Konstantinos, fought fiercely against the Ottomans during the 1821 Greek War of Independence.
But the modern demographic shift happened after the 1923 population exchange between Greece and Turkey. The Ottoman Bey's vast lands were expropriated and redistributed by the state.
And 121 refugee families who had lost everything in Bulgaria and Asia Minor were resettled on this land. They are building a new life from scratch.
And they need a name for their new town. The local metropolitan, Constantios II, suggests the name Vergina, named after a legendary local queen, Theodora of the Paleologos family, who was the last Greek ruler of the area before the Ottoman conquest in 1433.
So you have a brand new town populated by traumatized refugees built on land with a deeply layered history.
And sitting right next to this new town was a bizarre geographical feature, a series of massive, unnatural-looking earthworks. The most prominent was a colossal mound of earth, known locally as the Great Tumulus.
For decades, archaeologists had been hunting for Aegae. Aegae was the ancient, sacred royal capital and burial ground of the Macedonian kings.
The name literally translates to City of Goats. There's this great myth that the founder of the dynasty, King Perdiccas I, went to the Oracle of Delphi, and the oracle told him, follow a herd of goats, and where they stop, build your capital.
Early European archaeologists were completely baffled regarding its location. In 1861, a prominent French archaeologist named Léon Housy began excavating ruins near Vergina, but he incorrectly concluded that the site was the ancient city of Vala.
For over a century, that was the accepted academic consensus. Aegae was thought to be somewhere else entirely, perhaps near modern Edessa.
But then, in 1968, a brilliant British historian named Nicholas Hammond publishes a massive, paradigm-shifting theory.
He meticulously analyzes the ancient texts, studies the geography, looks at the distances mentioned by ancient historians, and declares to the academic world, you are all looking in the wrong place. Vela is wrong. Vergina is Aegae. The royal tombs are under that mound.
And initially, the academic establishment dismissed him. It was a radical claim. Even the eminent Greek archaeologist Manolis Andronikos, who had been excavating in the broader area for years, was highly skeptical of Hammond's theory.
But the geographical logic was incredibly sound, and Hammond's paper planted a seed in Andronikos' mind.
And that seed finally bloomed in the autumn of 1977. Manolis Andronikos, leading a dedicated excavation team for the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, decides to seriously probe the Great Tumulus.
They dig deep into the massive mound of earth, and what they found inside sent absolute shockwaves through the global archaeological community, landing on the front pages of newspapers worldwide.
Andronikos discovered a subterranean complex of royal tombs. And the absolute miracle of the discovery was that, unlike the vast majority of ancient tombs in Egypt or Greece, these had not been plundered by ancient grave robbers.
They were completely intact. I want to focus on Tomb a second because the discovery sequence is pure Indiana Jones.
It really is.
Imagine being Andronikos. You are digging through tons of dirt in a damp, dark trench, and you uncover a massive stone doorway that has been hermetically sealed for 2,300 years.
The anticipation must have been unreal.
You pry open the blocks, you shine a flashlight into the absolute darkness, and you realize you are the first human being to breathe the air inside this room since the 4th century BC.
And sitting right there in the main chamber is a solid gold larnax, a breathtaking, heavy, square golden casket.
And embossed on the lid of this casket is the blazing 16-ray Vergina sun.
The Vergina sun is a crucial detail, though it's worth noting, as a brief aside, that this ancient symbol became the center of an intense modern geopolitical firestorm.
Right, in the 1990s.
In 1992, when Yugoslavia broke apart, the newly independent state of North Macedonia placed the Vergina sun squarely on their national flag. This sparked a massive diplomatic dispute with Greece, who viewed the symbol as an exclusive, undeniable part of ancient Greek and Macedonian cultural heritage.
The friction was so severe, involving economic embargoes, that North Macedonia eventually redesigned their flag in 1995. But returning to the dim light of the tomb in 1977.
Right. Andronikos approaches this golden casket. Inside, he finds cremated human bones, carefully washed in wine, and wrapped in a stunning fabric woven with purple dye and gold thread.
Beside the casket is a masterpiece of ancient jewelry. A hyper-realistic, heavy golden wreath of oak leaves and acorn.
The chamber is packed with ceremonial armor, a beautifully crafted iron helmet, bronze greaves, silver drinking vessels, and weapons.
And outside, on the facade of the tomb, is a breathtaking, though fragile and damaged fresco depicting a chaotic royal lion hunt. Andronikos looked at the sheer, ungodly wealth of the artifacts, the dating of the pottery, the grandeur of the architecture, and he made his historic declaration. We have found the resting place of King Philip II of Macedon.
It was the archaeological triumph of the century. But in the world of high-level academia, nothing is ever accepted without a ferocious fight.
Of course not.
The moment the discovery was announced, a massive, highly technical, decades-long scientific debate erupted.
The core of the debate is the identity of the occupant. Is the man in the golden casket truly Philip II, the military genius and father of Alexander the Great? Or is it Philip III or Aegaeus?
Now, Philip III was Alexander's half-brother. He suffered from severe cognitive disabilities. He never commanded an army in his life. He served as a mere figurehead king after Alexander's death, and he was eventually assassinated by Olympias much later, in 317 BC.
The debate essentially split the archaeological world into two fiercely opposed camps.
The Philip III camp, which includes several prominent international historians, bases their argument largely on stylistic dating.
They analyze the specific curvature of certain silver drinking vessels found in the tomb, or the stylistic execution of a salt cellar, and argue that these objects seem to date a couple of decades after Philip II's assassination in 336 BC.
They suggest the tomb was constructed later for the figurehead king Aridaeus and his young warrior wife Aegae Eurydice, pointing out that the female armor found in the tomb's antechamber likely belonged to her.
Okay, I have to push back hard on this methodology. How can an art historian look at a silver cup and can confidently declare this cup was definitely made in 320 BC, not 336 BC?
This is a fair question.
Isn't carbon dating or even stylistic analysis way too broad and subjective to rule out Philip II over a margin of just 20 years? We aren't talking about centuries of difference here.
You have hit on the exact vulnerability of the Philip III argument, and it is precisely why the Greek academic community pushed back so ferociously. Stylistic dating is inherently subjective.
A craftsman might invent a new style of cup 20 years before it becomes wildly popular.
You cannot use a salt cellar to definitively overwrite forensic biology. And that is where the Philip II camp, led by formidable Greek scholars like Miltiades Hatzopoulos, the late Chrysoula Paliadeli, and specifically the brilliant physical anthropologist Antonis Bartsiokas, brought the hammer down.
They shifted the focus from the cups to the corpse. They utilized advanced forensic anthropology.
Because the bones tell a story that pottery cannot fake.
Precisely. Remember those catastrophic injuries we discussed earlier? The forensic team carefully analyzed the cremated skull fragments from the golden larnax.
And Bartsiokas identified a massive, distinct, heavily remodeled bone trauma to the upper right eye socket. The bone had shattered and healed over years.
It was a perfect, undeniable anatomical match for a downward striking arrow wound. Exactly the injury Philip II sustained at the siege of Methone.
Furthermore, they analyzed the tibia and fibula, the shin bones. They found severe asymmetry and bone fusion consistent with a massive, crippling trauma to the leg, exactly matching the spear wound from the RDI.
That is the smoking gun. You simply cannot fake a 2,300-year-old healed eye socket fracture. And Philip III Aridaeus spent his life in palaces. He didn't fight at Methone, he didn't take an arrow to the face, and he didn't take a spear through the thigh.
The forensic evidence is overwhelming. In 2010, comprehensive osteological studies seemingly ruled out Philip III entirely, as his known life history completely contradicts the brutal combat trauma permanently etched into those bones.
Now, to show you how endlessly fascinating and contentious this field is, in 2019, the esteemed Byzantine historian Helene Arweiler actually proposed a radical new theory, suggesting that it might be Alexander the Great himself buried in tomb II, secretly moved from Egypt.
The academic debate will likely never completely die, but the overwhelming prevailing consensus, backed by hard forensics, leans heavily and confidently toward Philip II.
Regardless of the academic squabbles, the cultural significance of Andronikos' discovery in 1977 cannot be overstated.
Yeah.
It completely rewrote the history books.
It did. Before Vergina, much of what the modern world knew about ancient Macedonia was heavily filtered through the writings of their bitter enemies.
If you read the fiery speeches of the Athenian orator Demosthenes, his famous Philippics, he paints the Macedonians as a bunch of drunken, illiterate, peripheral barbarians who wore bear skins and couldn't speak proper Greek.
The treasures pulled from the Great Tumulus completely shattered that Athenian propaganda. The metallurgy, the delicate, intricate goldwork of the wreaths, the masterful execution of the frescoes. It proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that Macedonia was not a barbarian backwater.
It was a culturally rich, artistically sophisticated, enormously wealthy superpower operating at the absolute apex of classical Greek craftsmanship.
And the way Greece chose to display this history is brilliant. To protect these incredibly fragile artifacts and to maintain the sacred atmosphere of the site, in 1993 they built a massive state-of-the-art museum directly into the earth of the tumulus.
You literally walk out of the bright Greek sunshine, down a dark ramp, and underground into the burial mound itself. You can stand inches away from the actual facade of Tomb II.
You can see Tomb III, which is universally believed to belong to Alexander IV, Alexander the Great's tragically murdered teenage son. You can see the breathtaking abduction of Persephone fresco from the heavily looted Tomb I.
It is an incredibly somber, awe-inspiring experience. It is so globally significant that it was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1996.
It forces the modern viewer to confront the tangible, physical reality of these mythic figures. They aren't just characters in a dusty history book anymore. They were real men who bled, who wore iron helmets, and who were buried with profound grief.
Okay, let's take a deep breath and bring all of this sprawling history back to the present day. I want you to pull your focus out of the dark, underground tomb in Vergina and bring yourself all the way back to the glaring afternoon sun on Filippou Street in Thessaloniki.
It's quite the contrast.
You are walking down that 1.3-kilometer stretch of asphalt. You hear the students laughing at a cafe. You look up and you see the Sotiropoulou mansion from 1929 with its heavy Baroque curves stubbornly surviving a century of economic turmoil and urban decay.
You look down over the railing and there's the Roman Agora, where ancient citizens debated politics among colossal marble statues that are now locked away in a museum in Paris.
And you look at the street sign hanging over the intersection. Filippou, the namesake, a one-eyed, limping, ruthless military genius resting in a golden casket beneath the earth in Vergina, a man who broke the world so his son could conquer it.
When you weave all these desperate threads together, it leaves us with a profound realization about human nature. Everything we have discussed today, the architecture, the urban planning, the military tactics, the golden artifacts, they are all fundamentally mechanisms by which humanity attempts to cheat death.
Wow, yeah.
Think about the psychological drive required for the architects of the Sotiropoulou mansion to aggressively rebuild a beautiful, opulent city from the devastating, smoldering ashes of the 1917 fire.
Think about a Macedonian king meticulously designing an unstoppable phalanx, giving his own eye and his leg, purely so his name would echo through eternity.
Think about Manolis Andronikos, spending his life patiently digging in the dirt to rescue the truth from oblivion. We are all just desperately trying to leave a mark that outlasts our fragile physical bodies.
When you walk down a street like Filippou, you aren't just walking on layers of asphalt, concrete, and soil. You are walking on the echoes of those who simply refuse to be forgotten.
I couldn't have summarized it better myself. It really is a street of ghosts demanding to be remembered.
But before we go, it makes me think about a modern conflict happening right beneath the city as we speak. We talked about cheating death, but sometimes the dead refuse to make room for the living.
Oh, the metro.
Exactly. You look at the massive ongoing delays with the construction of the new Thessaloniki metro system. Every time the engineers try to dig a modern subway tunnel to alleviate traffic for those students on Filippou Street, their massive boring machines crash into another ancient Roman cemetery or a Byzantine crossroad.
The city is literally forced to halt its own future because the sheer volume of its past is physically blocking the way.
It leaves you wondering, in a city this ancient, how do you balance the desperate needs of the living with the overwhelming, inescapable presence of the dead? The next time you walk down a city block anywhere in the world, look up at the balconies, look down at the pavement, and ask yourself what sleeping giants you are stepping on.
That is a lot to chew on.
That wraps up our exploration today. And as a final important reminder, this deep dive was brought to you as a special feature of the wider project. The Street has its own story, or O Dromo Setidiki to Historia, by Giannis Stefanidis. Keep exploring, keep looking beneath the surface, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.